Uh, Good afternoon. We'll start with just a quick roll call for the members of the ESS committee. Enter something in the chat pod or give a shout out once I call your name. Travis Chase,
Present.
Denise Baker, Denise. You can enter it in the chat pod if appropriate. Okay, thank you. Denise is entered in the chat pod. Jolene Goodchild,
Here.
Jamie Sturgill,
Here.
Natalie Steffner, Natalie. Okay, we'll move on. Melissa Benson,
Here.
Julie Haggerty,
Here.
Chair Ann Ditchworth,
Here.
Eric Sloan from ICIT, David Erickson.
Here.
Thank you, David, and Dylan Malone.
Here.
Okay, thank you. That completes the roll call. If anybody didn't give a shout out, please just enter something in the chat button. So thank you. Ann?
Okay, so we are here today for our special committee meeting. Phil has done the review, and so welcome and introductions are underway. I think we can shift quickly into legislative update.
Okay. I'm going to ask if Bob Rafferty joined us yet, or if not, I can get started.
I am on, Phil.
Okay. So what I'm going to share is my screen with the notes that were distributed just a little bit ago to the committee members, and just want to share that with you, and would ask Bob to provide us with an update. That where we left off is that at your recent meeting, we talked about some direction about what to communicate about the various aspects of the outline as a follow-up to the subcommittee meeting. And there have been some communications, and we have updated information. So I'm going to ask Bob to share that information. You should be able to see a bulleted list that basically are the notes similar to what we looked at earlier, but updated to reflect some of the information from subsequent conversations. Bob?
Hi. Yes. So yesterday, both Nick Lanning and I met with the Representative Nordman. He wanted to share that he was going to prepare an amendment, wanted our feedback on that. It would be a revised amendment from a previous one that he had shared. The bullet points that Phil shared is both Nick and my best and Census's best summary of those points. That they were just conveyed orally, so I think we have accurately captured that, and I hope so. And I would. So the key thing was one, that the counties would have an unconditional right to leave the 2080. There would be a $10 recording fee included. He was indicated an openness to just either leave it up to the 2080 as to how much of that $10 fee would go to ILR, or he'd be willing to put it in an actual specific amount. I had indicated to him that I thought it might be difficult to get 99 county supervisors on board to agree to a set fee, so it might be easier to put it in. And then he also stated that for counties that would not participate in the 2080, that would leave the 2080, that they would still provide $2 per document to ILR. The non-2080 counties would still have to submit documents to ILR for the search function. And that there would be a $3 charge for e-submittals, and but those submittals could either go through ILR or could go directly to a county if a 2080, if a county decided not to participate in the 2080. That there would be a structure set up so that ILR could contract with those non-2080 counties with an expectation that there'd be an agreement. But that's, we had talked about, we kind of identified that could be an issue in ensuring that we had statewide coverage. So, but I think I think he, as he indicated, that his intention to, that you'd want still the ability for an individual to be able to submit through ILR to all 99 counties. And then he did reference that there'd be an expectation of an RFP to every 5 years for ILR to determine who would actually manage the database. Any change from the current manager would have to be approved by 60 recorders. Although he indicated if a sufficient 80 recorders, I think he suggested, agreed that you could bypass that RFP. And then, as Phil alluded to, is he was discussing putting the back to blue language in. And again, I want to preface this is conceptual. There has been no language, there's no amendment at this point. And he was looking for feedback, but it indicated that he probably would receive feedback. So, so I think that hopefully captures the summary. And if Phil or Census, if there's anything I missed that you recall, please let me know.
Well, Bob, and you may not have discussed it specifically. So, if you don't know, I guess the right answer is you don't know. But sort of implied in the inclusion of the $10 recording fee, that it somewhat implies that that section of the code, similar to the previous amendment draft that we saw, it would take out the additional transaction fee, and then we presume that the $2 allocation for the Recorder's County Technology Fund would be included. It's not specifically mentioned in your bullet list, but you have a sense of, the disposition of those issues from your conversation.
I mean, I can only assume. We did not go into that level of detail. So I assume it would be somewhat consistent, but I did not get an indication one way or another.
So in terms of the discussion at the last meeting of the committee, the committee reviewed some concepts that would be advanced, and kind of the way it actually happened is that your understanding is that even though we didn't have a meeting to present anything, he was aware of the content of the previous committee discussion, and that what positioned him to use that information to go ahead and say, okay, here's my revised version, and that's what this represents, right? So we didn't really present anything to him, but he had knowledge of the discussion, apparently. Is that how you would characterize it?
Correct. Yeah. He was aware of the concepts that we would be bringing to him, and correct.
So would you characterize, from the standpoint of, the earlier discussion versus the updated version, things that stand out for me that are different are the more explicit say, okay, we'll keep basically what the current code says about the $3 e-submission fee for ILR, and that he did appear to take a step forward in terms of saying, okay, I kind of I'm putting words in his mouth, so maybe I shouldn't, but what was different is that he actually uh, came closer to the proposal of providing the allocation for ILR. Instead of $1, he basically is saying, okay, we'll go ahead and say $3 for the 28E counties, but $2 for the non-28E counties. So that was more explicit, and if we understand it correctly, would provide more resources for ILR operations. Would that be a correct interpretation?
Yeah. I mean, I want to say he had indicated the $2 from the non-participating counties. And as I think I mentioned earlier, his initial inclination was to leave it to the 2080 agreement to determine what portion would go to ILR. But again, we had suggested to him that it may be difficult to get a consensus among all the 90 plus county supervisors on that.
So the qualification is it looks like it was a difference, but we haven't actually seen the amendment yet. But that's what you were inferring from what you shared with you, correct?
Correct. You
Okay.
mean correct.
Yeah. Okay. And then another follow-up comment I would ask you to elaborate on is that one of the things that I think we left the last ESS committee meeting with the suggestion that, there was an expectation, what was discussed is that, okay, present to him that there would be some agreement to allow a county that was not in the 28E agreement to establish an alternative channel for e-submission documents other than or in addition to ILR. And what was intended to be communicated with them, though, is that the expectation is that the connection to the ILR e-submission service, pretty much as it's structured today, would continue. And if I understand your summary, um, your bullet points and the kind of conversation that we have had about it, basically that idea was not accepted. That the counties would be allowed to set up their own channels for e-submission, and that if there was going to be a connection to the Iowa Land Records e-submission service, that would be decided on a case-by-case basis, more or less, with the individual county, and the exact form that would take would be specified in whatever that agreement is. It would sort of be a negotiated arrangement, as I understand how you described it. Am I capturing that correctly?
Well, as I understand, that's how I had understood what Representative Nordman was suggesting. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So,
And we always obviously have to be careful, but yes, I think that's safe to
okay.
say.
And you were kind of going there where what I was going to say next, and that is, all of this has to be qualified, with the understanding that this is intended to be a summary of your impressions of what she shared with you, but we haven't really seen the updated amendment yet. So, we're not 100% sure the details of it, and we're probably just going to have to wait for that to be published in some form before we can really know for sure. Is that a fair
Oh yeah,
summary?
no, absolutely. I mean, he wanted to share that with us so we could take it back to the ESS board. Um, and to get, feedback on that. On these concepts, he will be putting together amendment. He had invited our feedback, as he has kind of throughout this process.
And so what was the feedback then that we've shared? He had given us an initial list of things that is somewhat reflected in this bullet list, but what was the feedback that we shared with him? Can you maybe summarize that?
Yeah, Nick was the one who I want to make sure I captured it fully, and I may not have. One that, yes, to make sure we put in the code, the designated amount for ILR. That we thought it was an important
Waiting for his luggage too, hasn't he? That's
Uh,
why.
raising issues on, or making raising the concern about making sure other counties that are not participating in the 28E, that we ensure that that people will be able to submit through ILR to those counties, and that there wouldn't necessarily be a fee for that. And then I'm trying to think, there may have been some additional feedback that's just I'm not thinking of right now, that Nick would have conveyed regarding our concerns. And one thing I do want to make clear, we're conveying feedback, and we're not conveying that, hey, this concept can be acceptable to us if these kind of changes are made. We were just giving him some initial feedback to his comments to try to, help make sure the amendment would be as palatable as possible if it does move forward.
There's a question that's been posted in the chat pod that I'll just take a stab at, and I think it's directed at us, from saying that what we expressed to Representative Norman was the preference to have the e-submission fee that we charge currently, instead of saying, a reasonable fee, but to actually put that back or keep that in the code. And then what we understood would be a more specific reference to what we had previously referred to as an allocation to ILR from the base recording fee, except that it wouldn't be referred to as an allocation. It would be described in some other way. And if I understood what Bob was saying, or what Bob and Nick were saying, is that that he was essentially saying that if the 28E counties could specify that amount, uh, also in the code, but only applying it to the 28E counties, and then saying something about the minimum amount that the non-28E counties would contribute, would be that $2 allocation, for lack of a better term. So that's kind of how I interpreted what you were sharing, you and Nick were sharing. Am I saying that correctly, or
Yes, uh, and hopefully that was kind of communicated. Sometimes it can get confusing because both fees are $3 that we're talking about. So hopefully that was successfully, that we're on the same
Yeah.
page.
and,
That Representative Nordman understood what we were referring to.
Right. And again, we can't be 100% sure because we don't have anything in writing. And this is just your reflection on what she shared with you. So, if I were going to, I have one more question to you in terms of, in the conversation that you had, did you speak to sort of, how some of the outside stakeholder groups would react to any of these issues? Was that part of the conversation with the representative, or not?
Well, um, I'm trying to think, if we, I mean, we obviously don't, I mean, we will defer to the outside groups. We did mention well, I'm trying to think if it was in that conversation or elsewhere, where we just mentioned the importance of, ensuring whatever happens in the end, it's the stakeholders need to be comfortable
Yeah,
um,
okay.
with the end solution.
Um, I'm seeing another question in the chat pod about the $3 e-submission fee that currently is in the code. And one of the um, pieces of language in the earlier draft of the amendment that we have seen did have that represented as just simply saying could charge a reasonable fee. And in my communication with Bob and Nick, one of the things I shared with them is that, you know, reaching an agreement with the stakeholders on the $3 e-submission fee, was a very serious discussion. In our prior communications with the stakeholder groups, they really were not comfortable in just leaving that to the decision of the governing board. And so that's how we arrived at the $3 amount. And so,
That,
yeah, the intention would be to, yes, we would have to go back to the legislature if it was ever necessary.
yeah, that's correct. Thanks, Phil. Nick kind of did, stress that point to Representative Nordman that $3 in fact had been negotiated.
feel it?
Yep. It's whipping. Ew.
Okay. So, if I had to kind of take a step back and say, okay, how would we interpret what was said here with regard to this list? Uh, and again, qualifying it and saying we don't know it for sure until we see the amendment, but you can kind of look at it from
69.
two main points, and one of the main points is that the fee structure appears to be close to what the association was asking for. Whether you call it an allocation or some other terminology, uh, the the amount that would go to the recorders for the technology would still be in place, and we would have something closer to the idea of a $3 allocation for ILR, at least for most counties, and the potential for some acceptance of the statutory amount on how much our e-submission fee could be. Um, and generally, I think in fairness, that those were things that um the representative was indicating to Bob and Nick that were more in the direction of where uh ESS and the association were intending to go, particularly with respect to fee policy. So, sort of an advancement of that in comparison to the previous version of the language that we have seen. And so I would characterize that to be sort of on the positive side. On maybe the not so positive side is that the ideas that were expressed to him that would kind of suggest that even if you weren't in the 28E organization, the expectation that every county continue to participate by uploading records and then also participating in the e-submission application, pretty much the way we are doing things today, with the addition of the county option to have an additional channel for e-submission outside of Iowa land records. That idea of sort of keeping that same framework in place was not really accepted. I would try to say it diplomatically that way, and so um, you have a kind of a broad intention to say counties can leave the 28E, they're captive. You can say that uh, counties would be expected to upload records to ILR and the application of the search engine. Uh, Details not really specified, but could be something very close to what we're doing today. But um, but not really an expectation that the non-28U counties would participate in the current e-submission application, at least as we do it today. That was sort of on the negative side of, no, we're probably not going to do that. And and so, in terms of the balance, there were some things that there was some favorable movement on from your perspective, that is ESS and the association, and there were some that really did not move in that direction and we're kind of still in the same spot on. And I'm hoping I can capture that general theme of those two main areas. And Bob, if I didn't say that right, please correct me.
No, I think so.
Phil, this is Julie Haggerty. I'm a little confused because in the conversation I understood was that in particular was Dallas County. She wanted her clientele to have the option of ILR or through her vendor. So my question, what I'm hearing you say is that they can't have it both ways. Is that what you're saying? That they can't have it both ways? That we would not take any e-submissions from we wouldn't take any submissions from Dallas County. They would have to go directly through her vendor? Or would we still take e-submissions from people that wanted to file from us with from Dallas County?
My understanding, again, I'll defer to Bob if he thinks I'm saying this wrong, is that yes, they definitely wanted to have the option of using their own vendor and having e-submissions filed to the county directly through that vendor. That was a yes. They still intended and wanted to do that. What we understand the position to be with regard to the ILR e-submission service is that they would not intend to use our interface to review and approve or decline documents the way it is done today, but instead they would have an expectation that we would somehow integrate with their system and send them the records, but they wouldn't do anything within the e-submission application itself as it happens today. That would require some changes on our part, because we still, I mean, I'm not trying to be controlling here, but in order to fulfill our responsibility to our customers, we would need the county system to return recording information and the recorded image back through our system in a certain way so that we could then communicate with our customer, hey, the recording has been done or the recording was not approved. That wouldn't, as I understand, would not be happening through our interface anymore. And I don't know what that would look like yet, but according to what was shared with Bob and Nick, how that would work and even if it would work or if it would be agreed to or not would be subject to a discussion that we would have to have individually with that county to determine whether or not it could be done. So it could go either way. It could go in a way where we could agree to the technical requirements and the business requirements and make that happen, or if we couldn't reach that agreement, then the only channel into that county would be the county's e-submission system, not ILR. The one thing that we asked Nick to convey relating to that, once we kind of had that opportunity to give additional feedback, is we and I believe Nick did this, shared with the representative that we really would not want to be in a position to, to pay the county an access fee in order to have them receive an e-file document through our system. And so that was shared, that idea was shared, but we really didn't receive any comment or feedback on that specifically. And it's not reflected in this bullet list because I think even though Nick made that comment, it just, in the conversation we got back, it just did not include that answer. So we still don't know what the answer to that might be, but I think it is unclear, based on what we know right now, whether or not we could be certain that a non-28E county would be connected to the ILR e-submission service. I just don't know that. And it seems like, based on what we've heard, that would be up to some type of negotiation or agreement between ILR and the individual county. And again, Bob, if I didn't say
So,
that right,
Rip-
please correct me.
Yeah, we didn't get into that level of detail that, Phil, you jump into how the actual mechanics would work. Representative Nordman, it's his, where he would like to see that someone can still file in all 99 counties through ILR. That would be he would like to see that as an outcome of the legislation. So, but he would envision that ILR would work out an agreement with each non-participating county to ensure that happens. And and so, how the devil will be in the details on that.
Other questions? Thank you, Bob.
Well, I just have a comment about the $3, 3 to 2. First of all, the 3 to 2 has to come after we get the increase in recording fees. But second of all, we've already told him, Representative Nordman, that the carve out doesn't necessarily cover everything, and that the $3 e-submission fee has always been supplemental, has always supplemented the system. So I kind of feel like the 3 to 2 should remain, just so it doesn't cause any confusion in the code sections and in our bill, because I believe that we'll probably, in most cases, we'll still need to supplement our resources. So, I mean, did Nordman seem like he was open to whatever we choose to ask for? In that $2, $1, $2, $3?
Yes, I had that was the impression I had, is that if we wanted the $3 in the code, he would be open to putting it in the code.
Okay.
Yeah.
Along with the
participating and
$2 for
I'm
and $2 for non-participating.
Yeah, but that's what I'm,
Correct.
is he okay with non-participating as well, or? Is
At
the
$2.
Oh,
At $2.
I think it should be free for everybody.
I understand. He had expressed that the intent would be that they would put $2 from non-participating. So
So coordinating committee, are there any other questions on these bullet points?
So this is Denise. So the $3 and the $2, does that $3 fee, does that support the search engine for ILR?
It would. It would, just as the e-submission fee would. And so, I would say, if we understand what he's presented to Bob and Nick correctly, we're closer to having resources to do the things that you have wanted us to do than we were in the earlier version. It's not everything that we suggested. I, I did share with the the executive leadership of the association, just kind of knowing what the math is. But we still have an issue that if we could not work out an agreement with the non-28E counties, and I was just looking at those counties who said that they were interested in leaving the 28E, uh, that could, and if they didn't do anything through the ILR e-submission service, that is potentially $250,000 hole in our budget, because some of those counties were not small counties. So I don't want to give you the impression of, oh yeah, we're going to have everything that we want or needed, because there are still some challenges built into that. But I just also have to acknowledge that I'm speculating about that based on certain assumptions. So again, it kind of boils down to, what would the amendment actually say, and to what extent would all of those counties just decide that they aren't going to participate at all? And I really don't know the answer to that yet.
But I guess if we are all going to be required to, upload to ILR for the search function for all 99 counties, I don't understand why the non-28 counties would be $1 less than the ones that are participating. That just doesn't make any sense to me. If we're all going to have to do the same thing, why would they get it for $1 cheaper?
I agree. Not only that, it's gonna cost us money for them to leave the 28E. And I think we've already kind of stated that the e-submission fee supplements the search engine. Is that still correct, Bill?
Well, the e-submission, if I understood you correctly, the e-submission fee is still a significant contributor to financing the overall operation, because in today's world, it's really one of the main sources of funding for everything, not just for e-submission. If the allocation was there and most of the counties participated, we could be in a better position than we are today, but wouldn't be as beneficial as what we had advanced in Senate File 371. So it's something that we would need to just take a look at the specific language and whatever the amendment is, and then make some assumptions and estimating from there. So I don't uh, I guess what I would say is, this is sort of the funny part about the whole e-submission versus search application separation. We're functioning as one system. We have a common authentication system for user management, and it's not easily separated. And so the entire revenue stream, whether it's especially since we can't earn any revenue from the search side of it, which I'm not complaining about, but we 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 have to, whatever revenue streams we have to support the whole. It's not just one application or the other.
Well, personally, I'd like to see everybody have to pay $3. It's part of the revenue, it's part of the search engine.
I totally agree, Julie. We've got a lot of wants that, we want to accomplish, and we need money to do that. So, yeah, I just have an issue with them getting off cheaper.
Right. It doesn't make sense that they should only have to pay $2. Everybody that participates has to pay $3. It's the same. They're doing the same thing we're doing. And they shouldn't, they can pull out and be out of the 28E, that's fine. And they don't have to pay, their customers don't have to pay the $3 e-submission to ILR. They can pay it to their own vendor if that's what they want. But I just don't think I think they're participating and the downloading and the preservation of the document and everything else, they should pay the same as all county recorders. That should be 3-2.
I agree. This is Jolene. I agree with that.
So can we put that back in our negotiation package and just say, how about this? We would really like to get the 3-2, what's the word, standardized over all the counties.
Colleen's asked a question, Colleen Bruning has asked a question in the chat pod about, what does this mean for the payment of the maintenance fees? I don't know the answer to that. Kind of just depends on how the math works out. I think the intent was with the provisions in Senate File 371 that if we could be successful with that, the intent was to have ILR take over those maintenance fees for the county, so you wouldn't have to do that anymore. And I think that would still be the intent, but you have to fit everything into the box to see, what you need. And I can't definitively answer that question right now. I could say that what the outline suggests is that we would be better able to do that under this outline than we were in the previous version of the amendment. I think that would be a fair statement. Could it be the entire thing, or just needs to be a higher proportion? Until we can see the details, I don't know the answer to that. But our intent and the desire is to do that because we know that that is important, particularly to the smaller counties. So I wish I could give you a more definitive answer, but that's where we would have to be to start with.
Bob, do we have a sense of the timeline when we would see an official amendment? I mean, did you receive any of that indication in your conversations with Representative Norman?
I think his intent is to have an amendment at some point next week.
And
But
Bob,
again,
Bob, go one step further. The potential is for this to be considered by the Ways and Means Committee next week.
possibly correct.
Here, are there any other questions from the coordinating committee or comments on what has been presented?
This is Melissa. I would say I do agree with Julie Denise about everyone should pay their fair share, but we were at $3 for counties using Iowa land records and $1. Now we're at $2 that the non-participating counties would pay, and I feel like that compromise is better than it was before if the bill includes the fee increase. I do deep down feel like everyone should pay the same, but I don't think we're gonna get that. So I do feel like it's a fair compromise.
But Melissa, don't you feel like if we at least put it in our back and forth, and they can always say no. I mean, I just feel like I just don't see why that should be their cost savings when we're doing the exact same thing. I think it's, unless it's a deal breaker, I mean, what we're saying is the $10 fee that we're getting, increase in recording fees, everybody's getting that. And we're all benefiting from it. Absolutely. But the carve out, or however you want to call it, the allocation is for the sustaining of Iowa land records and for preserving the record and for doing the things that we need to do. Them opting out is going to cost us all money. And if the submission supplements the cost and the cost of keeping Iowa land records alive, and if they truly believe in Iowa land records and want to keep it, especially if they're going to have people use it, especially if they're gonna keep it open, that, I know that we haven't decided that yet. But I just feel like the 3-2 should be non-negotiable. I mean, not non-negotiable, but it should, is fair.
Yeah,
Go
I
ahead.
agree too. This is Denise. You know, the 28E counties, you know, like one of the comments on here from Renee was non-28E counties would not be using ILR for any other services rather than the statewide search. But did I not understand that right? That her customers would have the option of whether they wanted to use ILR or Fiddler?
I think the intent would be for each of,
ILR.
for each submission, for each submission. Uh,
Correct, but
yeah.
she's saying that they're not going to be using ILR for anything other than the statewide search. Well, if she has customers that are using it, then yeah. I don't know.
There is a comment or a question in the chat pod that kind of brings up the issue of the vendor, and I don't know if Bob can speak to this or not, but uh, but you know, our thinking would be that at least initially, ILR would continue to be the operator of the search application. And I don't know what the the new amendment is going to say about selecting some other vendor. I don't know the answer to that, and I don't know if that was a subject of discussion from Representative Nordman and Bob or Nick. I just don't know. So we'll have to see what the amendment says.
So I'll circle
Our
back again to this coordinating committee and
Yep.
ask if there are any other questions regarding the bullet point presentation that has been made. There's a long ways to go before this is finished as far as an actual processed law. So this is all we have to work with. So are there any other questions on this bullet point list?
This is Dylan. I do have a quick question on the Sheriff Association Back to Blue language. Is that language we've seen before, or is that to be provided yet?
I believe it was in the draft amendment that was shared back at the end of February. And in reviewing that, I would say, Dylan, that the language was similar to earlier versions that you may have seen, but it is it's not identical. It's similar to my recollection is that some of the language that you and I had talked about is incorporated, but there were other changes made. So, I think it's something I would just recommend that any stakeholder take a very close look at, once it gets published. But if you had a copy of that from, I think, communications that we did back in February, and if you don't have a copy of that, I can send it to you. But
are you asking if there's a bill from the Sheriff's Association?
No, I was asking about the language. It sounds like it's language we've seen before. So thank you.
Yep. The language in Senate File 371 would retain current law. That's the way that is written. But we are aware that other people have other ideas about how to approach that issue. So I think we just have to wait for the amendment to come out, the new one, to see what it says and how it's structured. Okay, I would just ask, and I thank Ann for kind of focusing the discussion. I think what we're looking for, obviously, every time there's a change, we aren't going to be able to have a meeting. This seemed to be timely and directly related to, your conversation the other day, and therefore we felt it would be appropriate to have a meeting. But does the committee have any direction for us in terms of position to take? Anything you want us to communicate with the representative about? Um, how we're registering on the bill, things like that. We are looking for some direction from you as we go forward, with the understanding that we're speculating a little bit about what the actual amendment might be.
This is Travis. I don't feel like, unless there's language, unless we have physically on paper something we can read, I feel like we maintain our current position with ESS, which is currently undecided. I'm not going to take anybody's word for anything until I can see something on paper, but that's my opinion. So that would be my 2 cents on it.
Other thoughts from the committee on a position remaining undecided or otherwise?
This is Denise. I totally agree with Travis.
I do too. This is Jolene. I agree with Travis too.
Okay, so is anybody wanting to make a motion? We do have the ability to do so under approval, or otherwise we can just, let it ride. It's up to the group.
Well, I guess this is Julie. Am I unmuted?
No, you're unmuted.
Okay. The only thing is that I take position on is the 3 and 2. I mean, I'm mostly concerned about that one, but I don't understand. So what Representative Norman is asking us is to say we're okay with most of these things and then let him go ahead and create the amendment, or are we creating the amendment? What are we approving?
I didn't, this is Bob. I didn't interpret as he was looking for, give me feedback. This is the amendment that's going to be. You can give me feedback by the end of the day, and he invited that. But it didn't feel really like we were negotiating a final deal, if that's what you mean, that we're sort of like, hey, what about, this and this. But by any means, and yeah, no, I would certainly would not encourage you to in any way endorse this. As Travis said, you wouldn't want to endorse anything unless you saw the language, and you might not want to endorse it even when you do, and you may want to oppose it. I mean, that's really your call. But you shouldn't have the impression that this is a negotiated bullet point list. It's far from it.
Well, I don't mind returning it back to him and saying that, yeah, we're not really, there's some things because he's asking us what we think about some of these bullet points. And I'd like to change the number 3. Because it's all about preserving the record, and a statewide search that's access to everyone at no charge. So I'd like to see it 3 and 3. I mean, just $3 and skip the non-28E counties.
But Bob, did I understand you to say this wasn't a negotiation tool? This was just a conversation. Is that correct?
Yeah, this is kind of what he conveyed to us, and he did invite us to provide feedback. And so we have provided some of that feedback. I don't think that means we can't provide additional feedback. But again, I don't think Representative Nordman is going to take significant changes to this. I think he was looking more at tweaking or this is the concept, the way it's going to be. If there's certain ways you would like me to shape it, give me that feedback. But this is basically the outline that you're going to get.
Yeah, I think,
and that's how I would characterize it. And again, appreciate the fact that you invited that. But at the same time, it wasn't correct. Yeah,
Yeah.
this is not a negotiation.
He invited feedback, which is on the issues that we discussed at the previous meeting. Feedback was provided, at least indirectly, by him learning about the content of your previous discussion. He came back to Bob and Nick and said, okay, here is where I'm going with a bulleted list similar to this one, and asked for additional feedback by a time certain. And so, in consultation with the leadership of your groups, the association and ESS, we identified several things that we provided feedback on through Nick and Bob. And based on that, this is sort of the end of that conversation from the representative's point of view of, okay, well, this is what we're going with. That doesn't mean that there's no room for any future conversation or future discussion. It doesn't mean that amendments can't be filed. It just means that this phase of the conversation is over and that he's expressed his intent to move what you have in front of you to the Ways and Means Committee in the House, and to proceed through the legislative process. So that is where we're at. It doesn't mean that Bob and Nick or I have negotiated anything. We've given them feedback. I think we have been consistent in saying that we think it would be better if we had a statewide system that everybody participated in, um, and um, and that we provided appropriate funding for. We've said that. Bob and Nick have said that, but that doesn't mean that that's what his position is. So this is where we are at this moment in time, and I think um, I think I'll speak for myself and say that where we are right now, we would be comfortable in saying that we're going to remain undecided. We want to see stuff in writing, and we'll provide further comment, whether it's received positively or whether it's accepted or not. We'll continue to do that, um, and uh, and so there's potential for positive. We have, I think, in good faith, um, tried to suggest some areas for middle ground. Um, that doesn't mean we like everything, and the conversation can continue. There are some elements that have not yet weighed in on this whole discussion, um, and we'll just have to see how it plays out. Long way to go in the legislative process. So,
Bill Aaron has asked if you've gotten the numbers yet for the search engine, the overall cost on that.
well,
That has not been provided to Representative Nordman yet.
well, I guess the way I would interpret that right now is that we originally were planning after the last meeting of this group to say, okay, we'll work on that. And before I could complete that work, we were presented with, this is it. So I don't I don't know if I still owe a homework assignment or not, because it didn't seem to matter in advancing this idea. I can tell you with um, good certainty that going back to what we were looking at before, that $1 per document would not be sufficient to maintain the LR system. And I can tell you with good certainty that if we ended up with a $250,000 hole in our budget because of the loss of e-submission activity, it would be difficult to sustain operations as we know it today. That's true. I can tell you that, you know, I did enough work on this to know that um, um, when if you were to split this into two different systems, you're not only looking at essentially, you know, you're not just dividing it in two, you're losing efficiency because you still have to have developers, somebody, if they're not going to be in the same organization, somebody's going to have to maintain, support, and continue development on it. And we'd have to do the same thing in each submission. User management. You know, for security reasons, we have a registration system. It's not public self-registration. We pay attention to it because we want to know who our users are, and that's true for both search and e-submission. And if you split the two applications into two different platforms, you're going to have people to provide customer support and user management for both systems instead of one. You would have some adjustment in cost because, you know, one system has to maintain a database and a backup for 24 million records, whereas e-submission, you know, is roughly maybe 500,000 records maintained at any given time. So storage cost for e-submission would go down potentially from what we're doing right now, but whoever's doing the search application, you know, you still have 20, you have 48 million records to keep track of because you have to have, you know, you have to have a backup, right? So overall, I can confidently say it will cost more to separate these two systems than to do what we're doing today.
So
So
you and I can
I don't,
discuss
I
that
don't,
after
I don't
after
know
the
if I don't know if I have homework to do yet or not. So
Phil, you and I can discuss that after this call and circle back with Carter Nordman, make sure we're getting him the information that he needs.
Okay, so back to the committee. I had 4 noted and myself, so 5, to maintain our undecided status. Is there any movement from this committee to change that? Or otherwise we will just let it stay as undecided at this time until we have something in writing as an amendment. Is there any opposition to that from the committee?
This is Jamie. I don't have opposition. I just been in and out and by myself right now, but I would just agree with what everybody has said, just to stay undecided at this point.
Thank you, Jamie. Any other additions on that? So next steps, there just seems to be a hurry up and wait sort of situation here. So we will wait until we see something in writing and proceed after that time. Is there any other item from the committee that needs attention on this topic? Hearing none, I would ask for a motion to adjourn if somebody would like to do so.
Travis says so moved.
Joanne
Second.
This is
seconds.
Denise. I'll second.
We got all kinds of seconds. Thank you all for participating and listening in to those who spent time away from their normal day. We'll stay tuned. Thank you.
thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Phil, it's
Thank
Lisa.
you.
I'm reminding you to capture